Good evening. As I understand it, we're going to be hearing a lot about Mr. Luud Schimmelpennink today, and I thought it might be interesting for me to tell you some of the things that I've learned about him over the last, more than 40 years, I'm afraid, in which we have been corresponding, occasionally collaborating, and I've been keeping a close eye on what he's doing. And I have to say, and I guess that's why I'm here, that I'm a great admirer of Mr. Schimmelpennink. I would like to see if I can share with you some of the things that I've learned, which maybe other speakers here will not bring up tonight. And let me start with talking briefly about what I understand of his childhood, because most of the people in this audience were not on this planet in 1945 at the end of World War II, and those were very important years for those of us who were born in the 30s and started to breathe again in 1945. Between 1945 and early 1960s, the Netherlands was a poor country. And when you sat down at the table, you were going to have a hard time to find meat and eggs and steaks. You were able to find root vegetables, potatoes, the food of poor people. And when the Schimmelpenninks sat down to a table together, there were 11 boys and girls, quite a big family, and so it's quite a different atmosphere from what I imagine that most of you have had in your youth. But one of the characteristics of that time was optimism. Optimism that they were going to build, that we were all going to build our way to a better future. And we almost could feel the improvements day by day. Hard work. And it took us up to the early 1960s, in which there began to be a change in society. In the Netherlands and other parts of Europe, and certainly in the United States, we began to be collectively more wealthy. There was plenty of variety on our tables. There was a television set barking at us in the living room, and there was a car, a central part of the life of our family, and if we didn't have one yet, we wanted one. And all of this started to move very fast and created an atmosphere of self-contentment in the 1960s, which expressed itself by different forms of youth rebellion, youth revolt. And the one that has impressed me very much has been that of the Provos, who they say that the agents of change are madmen and poets. And they tried to prove it. But one of the things that came out of this great movement was some ideas about making this a better place, which lined up with the reality of our society. And the reality of our society was that we were losing control of technology, and we were destroying our cities. And you will hear from other people who are far better qualified than I am about this, but what was interesting was that in Amsterdam, these young men and women got together and began to think in terms of other ways of doing things. They came up with a white plan. We're going to hear about that. They came up with white bicycles. The White Bicycle Project failed quickly, the first one in 1965, and then the second plan for a white bicycle project, which had an incredible 10,000 bicycles, were called for in Luud Schimmelpennink's plan for public bicycles in Amsterdam. That was a number and a level of daring that the world had to wait almost for a generation to see again in 2007 in the city of Paris, in which it was proposed that they have 10,000 bicycles on the city streets. Well, that was a long time. That was a long time. And another of Mr. Schimmelpennink's project that we're going to hear about is the Witkar. And one of the characteristics about the Witkar was it worked. It was the world's first technology-based shared car. And yet the city didn't want to make it work. And there have to be lessons in that, because what Amsterdam is the cradle of innovation in these fields of shared transport. At the same time, what was happening in the world? Well, the shared bicycle project, the White Bicycle project today, has simply spread. And so that there are more than 1,100 of them in 69 different countries. And today, there are 2.6 million, roughly, shared bicycles that people are taking and riding anywhere from 5 to 10 times per bike per day. It has succeeded in the world. It failed in Amsterdam. The same thing for car sharing. Car sharing today is available in more than 2,000 cities worldwide and growing very fast. So that leaves us with a question about the future. And an important part of the future is Luud Schimmelpennink has a plan. It's not about white cars. It's not about white bicycles. It's not about white taxis. It's about all of them in the context of what he calls a white city mobility agenda. And white here means fair. It means just. It means clean. It means environmentally acceptable. It means low carbon. It means zero carbon. And these are the objectives of the white city mobility agenda. Now, just in passing, I have to make the point that this project is not about transportation. It is above all about the climate. It's about creating an alternative transportation system for our cities, which does not depend on internal combustion engines or the technologies of the 20th century, which simply do not match up with the characteristics and needs of the 21st century. It's that simple. The other concept which is key is that of sharing, which of course we are celebrating this evening. And the concept of sharing becomes necessary simply because the geometry of a livable city does not correspond with the geometry of a car. And indeed, in many cases, in cities like Amsterdam, it does not even correspond with the geometry of having your own bicycle. So we need bicycles, we need some kind of car, we need some kind of public transportation, but we need them to be zero carbon. And for them to fit into the context of our city, they have to be smart, and they have to be absolutely free of the contamination which is presently threatening our planet. So there we have it from this point of view anyway today. What's interesting about what Luud Schimmelpennink has done has been that he has created, he's made things happen. They have failed in his city, Amsterdam, his laboratory city. They have succeeded in the world. And so what can I say about it? Let me end with a poem by an Irish playwright Samuel Beckett, who wrote this years ago about failure. Ever tried, ever failed. No matter, try again. Fail again. Fail better. Well, I don't think that this next project of Luud Schimmelpennink is going to fail. In fact, I feel so positively about it that I'm trying to see if I can start a grassroots campaign to nominate Luud and his work, acknowledge his work for major international prizes, which will give a sort of implicit backing to the idea of the white city mobility agenda. And why not? Let's try for a Nobel Prize. After all, saving the planet is worth a Nobel Prize. Thank you.